right. I just wanted to go over a couple of things about poverty, socioeconomic status, and achievement gaps, just to make a few things more clear for when you are working on Unit 1 exam. So you'll hear the term socioeconomic status a lot in any health, human service, education field. When we think of socioeconomic status, people tend to think solely about the family's income, particularly looking at whatever the federal guidelines are for poverty. But we also have to remember that education levels and the parent's employment status also play a role in socioeconomic status. Socioeconomic status, whether somebody's living in poverty, they're middle class or upper class, are all going to affect things like child rearing, family-child interactions, language development and learning for the child, discipline, the type of discipline that a family uses and the kind and the amount, like how often they discipline, and then any future plans like education and employment, particularly for children, but also for the parents as well. Poverty is defined as the condition of having insufficient income to support a minimum standard of living. And looking at statistics in 2022, for a family of 4, the poverty line was $27,750. One of the things that I'm sure you're aware of is that employment does not guarantee an income above the poverty level. The statistics that we are concerned with are the statistics here where 14.4% of all children under 18 were living in poverty in 2019, and 6% were living in deep poverty, 50% below the poverty line. Typically, the poorest children tend to be the youngest children, and we know that birth to 5 is a critical point in time for development, and that's why dealing with the effects of poverty are important for us as educators. There's situational poverty and generational poverty. Situational poverty happens when there's an event that happens to the family, like a death of like the family breadwinner, or the loss of a job, something like that. Generational poverty is defined as being in poverty for 2 or more generations. So like grandma and grandpa lived in poverty, mom lived in poverty, and now the baby lives in poverty. When we talk about risk factors, one of the things I want to highlight is that this is what research tells us. This is the data that we have. It doesn't necessarily mean that every family living in poverty has experienced these things. So if you're looking at this information going, hey, I had a rough childhood, we didn't have a lot of money, and I turned out okay, that's great. Just remember, it doesn't necessarily mean every family has dealt with that, but statistically, families living in poverty are likely to deal with some of the things we'll talk about on the next couple slides. Kids are likely to have developmental delays, drop out of high school, and have a child during the teen years. So those are kind of 3 of the big factors. Mom is likely to have mental health problems, have an authoritarian discipline style. We talk about that in growth and development. Authoritarian is typically harsh punishment style, my rules, my way or the highway kind of thing. Poor interaction with children, the child, and probably didn't complete a high school education. In general, the family is likely to be a minority. Head of household has a semi-skilled or unskilled job, typically absent father, several stressful events in the last 12 months, and a large family size. You can watch the YouTube video on your own. But the effects of poverty on young children. So these are the things that we need to be aware of as early childhood educators, so that when we are working in our high quality programs, we can help with some of these problems. Low birth weight, unhealthy diet. Food insecurity means that they don't necessarily know where their next meal comes from. It may come from a food pantry, it may come from friends, it may mean skipping a meal or 2 or 3. They may live in a food desert. A food desert means that there is not a grocery store close, within walking distance, and they have to go someplace further away to be able to get to a grocery store, and or a grocery store that has things like fresh meat, fresh fruits and vegetables, etc. Some other effects include behavior issues, typically fewer learning experiences. One of the things that we know about families living in poverty is they may not have access to high quality early childhood education, or they may not be connected with programs that help parents be able to provide learning experiences for their children. Moving frequently tends to be an issue. Lack of quality schools, low self-esteem, learning problems. So one of the things that we know is that participating in high quality early childhood programs is good for children. Higher academic achievement, less likely to repeat a grade or need special education, higher graduation rates, more likely to attend college, less likely to be in the criminal justice system. So if we look at these statistics, the effects of poverty on young children, and we get children who are living in poverty into high quality early childhood programs, we know that that is going to benefit the child. As adults, those they're likely to have higher monthly earnings, more likely to own a home, less likely to depend on public assistance, less likely to use tobacco, lower rates of teenage pregnancy, and fewer arrests, including drug-related arrests. So in general, what we know we can do for kiddos living in poverty is make sure that we are the best teachers that we can be, and also connect those families with high quality early learning experiences. Knowing the best way to work with children and families living in poverty, increasing instructional time, eliminating retention. So instead of holding a child back, let them go up to the next grade with their peers and work on remediation within the classroom or within the school. Research tells us that retention doesn't work. It's all about remediation. And then smaller class sizes as well. So one of the things that we have to do is make sure that we are getting families living in poverty connected to those high quality early childhood programs. We go back and look at these effects of poverty. A few other things need to be highlighted here. So families living in poverty tend to be isolated, meaning that they don't have a lot of resources. Transportation can be difficult. If the parents don't have a job or are not going to school, or like a single parent who's not working or going to school and she's home all day with the children and doesn't have a lot of connections with other people, that isolation can be difficult. Particularly with transportation and getting kids to early childhood programs is a problem. Also, making sure that parents understand the importance of high quality early childhood programs, like educating them about why it's important. Language barriers can also be an issue. And then also sometimes, there can be cultural factors as well. Like if the culture of the family is that we take care of our children, or, aunts, uncles, grandmas babysit children, that's great. I think that they should have those familial connections, but it's also important to make sure that those kids do spend some time in preschool so that they can get the effects of the high quality programs. Okay, moving on to achievement gaps. So the achievement gap simply means that there's a lagging academic performance of one group compared to the other, which typically just means if you are thinking about kindergarten 5-year-olds who are going to kindergarten, there is going to be a gap between one group of children who have all of the skills and the kindergarten readiness skills that they need to go to kindergarten, and another group who have not reached that line yet, who do not currently have the skills, all of the skills that they need to be kindergarten ready. But everybody's 5 years old, and we know when everybody's 5, everybody goes to kindergarten. like, that's an overstatement, but you know what I mean. Typically, the gap is between high socioeconomic status and low socioeconomic status children and families. Typically white versus Black and Hispanic. We can identify the achievement gaps as early as 18 months. So when we're looking at development of the at 18 months, we can already start to see some of those developmental delays that are then going to lead to delays in being kindergarten ready. The reason we should care is because of issues like crime, jobs, taxes, the economy. Because when you're thinking about it, typically if a child doesn't get help and they're behind in their skill level, it's likely that they're going to continue to be behind in their skill level. And one of the things that we need to focus on as early childhood providers is making sure that we know how to work with young children so that we can increase their skills and their development, leading to them being more likely to be ready for kindergarten when they get there. Achievement gaps are caused by a variety of things: culture and the environment, poverty, poor schools, bad teachers, single parent households, motivation in general, and access to high quality early childhood programs. There are some things that we can do to close the gap. Universal pre-K means that every child in the United States, regardless of socioeconomic status, gets to go to preschool, at least for like at least for 4-year-old preschool, so that they can work on the kindergarten readiness skills that they need to be ready for the next year when they hit kindergarten. You might hear like that be called voluntary preschool. You might hear other terms, but you might hear it be called 4-year-old preschool. You might hear it be called preschool for all. That's what the goal is to help them be ready for kindergarten. Home visiting programs for new parents and children who are birthed to 5 to help them learn about their child's development, parenting skills, how to help their children with development and learning so that they'll be kindergarten ready. Having good standards and a core curriculum, challenging curriculum, and then good teachers as well, that not only are good at teaching, but also working with families and supporting them as well. Okay, so that was just a little bit more about socioeconomic status, poverty, and the achievement gap. I think this will help you. This is all information that comes from Chapter 2, so make sure that you read it in Chapter 2 as well, but the information will help you with that first unit exam that's coming up.